The chair is empty. You are certain someone was sitting in it. You watched the outline for 11 minutes, the shape of a person, perfectly still, just past the reach of the fire's light. You did not breathe. You did not look away. You told yourself it was a shadow, a trick of the trees, the kind of thing that happens when exhaustion and darkness combine. But the chair moved. Not violently. Not dramatically. The way a chair moves when someone stands up from it. That slow drag of weight lifting. The slight rock backward before settling still. And the shape was gone. No one spoke. No one screamed. Everyone already understood that screaming would not help. You are still at that campsite. Part of you never left. Connor McAllister had been trying to find his people for 2 years. That sounds dramatic. He would be the first to say so, leaning back in the plastic chair of the hostel common room outside Inverness, staring at the water-stained ceiling while his flatmates scrolled their phones and watched cooking videos at low volume. He was 22 years old, studying environmental science at the university, sharing a room with a guy named Paul who thought camping meant the car park at a national park, and a man named Rory who had once asked, with genuine curiosity, why someone would willingly sleep on the ground. Connor had always loved the Highlands the way some people love a language, not just for what it communicated, but for the sounds it made when it was quiet. The particular weight of Highland silence. The smell of rain on heather. The way a trail feels under your feet when the path has been walked for centuries and the ground remembers it. He had a blue fleece that his mum had given him the Christmas before he left for university. He wore it every time he went out. He kept a small folding knife in the left pocket, not for anything sinister, just for cutting rope or opening packages, the kind of tool that becomes part of you when you spend time in the outdoors. That knife. That blue fleece. These were the things that meant he was about to go somewhere real. He had tried the hiking clubs at the university. They were fine. Organized. Safety briefings and group WhatsApps and routes carefully chosen to avoid any genuine uncertainty. He wanted uncertainty. He wanted the specific fear of standing on a ridge and fading light and knowing that whatever happened next depended entirely on him. He found the group on a Saturday morning at a petrol station just off the A9, somewhere north of the city, where a cluster of Land Rovers and touring bikes had collected near the air pump. One of the riders, a woman named Sienna Bouchard, it turned out, originally from Edmonton but living in Scotland for a decade, had glanced at his bike, glanced at him, and moved her bag slightly to make room. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. By the end of it, she had added him to a group message. By the following Friday, he was loading his kit into the back of a borrowed Defender, heading north into the Cairngorms with 6 people he had never spent more than an afternoon with. He told himself this was what he had wanted. He was right. He just did not yet understand what else he was getting. The location Sienna had chosen was 2 hours north of the last town worth calling one. A forestry track that became a footpath that became, eventually, a wide flat clearing near the base of a steep birch-covered slope. There was an old fire ring already there, stones arranged by some previous camper who had done this before. The river was close enough to hear. The sky, once they got away from the vehicles and let their eyes adjust, was the kind of sky that makes you feel briefly and specifically aware of how small you are. There were 7 of them. Connor, Sienna, a quiet man named Declan Ashworth who worked in civil engineering and barely said 20 words the entire evening, 2 brothers from Dundee whose names Connor never fully caught, a woman named Amelia Sharp who had done this kind of camping for 15 years and wore the experience lightly and completely, and a young man called Finn, no last name offered, no last name asked. They had the camp set up before 8. Tents, a generator no larger than a toolbox for the lights, a fire built properly in the existing ring. Amelia had brought a small folding grill. Someone produced tea from somewhere. The light faded in that slow northern way, reluctant and golden, and for a while Connor simply sat and felt something he had been waiting to feel. He noticed, without attaching any significance to it, that Finn did not sit near the fire. He stood at the edge of the clearing, where the birch trees began, watching the slope above. Connor thought nothing of it. Some people just liked to stand. The two brothers had decided to walk the upper slope before full dark. They had headlamps and a radio and the confident manner of people who did this regularly. Sienna watched them go without concern. Declan, sitting near the fire, had barely looked up from his mug. An hour passed. The kind of hour that is easy when everything is right: sound of the fire, weight of the night, small bursts of conversation that did not feel the need to go anywhere in particular. Connor was beginning to understand why people did this. Not the walking. Not the scenery. The particular quality of being genuinely removed from everything else, where the things that felt urgent at 9 in the morning became, out here, revealed as what they actually were: small, provisional, not remotely permanent. He noticed the radio had been quiet for a while. Sienna noticed at the same moment. She picked it up from the log beside her and pressed the call button. The brothers' names. Once. Twice. Static. Then nothing. Declan looked up. Amelia set her mug down. Connor said, calmly, that the signal probably dropped. The terrain did that. He had read about it. The topography up in the birch-covered slopes could create dead zones. Amelia agreed that this was true. For a few minutes everyone agreed in various quiet ways that this was true. Then the radio produced a sound that was not speech and was not static and was not wind. It was breathing. Long, deliberate. The sound of a person who is very close to a microphone and does not wish to speak. Who wishes, instead, for you to hear that they are there. Sienna brought the radio to her ear. Her face did something that Connor could not fully interpret, but that stayed with him for a very long time afterward. She pressed the button. Asked clearly who was there. Asked if the brothers were all right. A pause that lasted exactly the right length of time to be frightening. Then, very softly, so softly that Connor was not completely certain he had heard it correctly, turned the lights off. No one spoke. The fire crackled. The river ran. The birch trees at the clearing's edge stood in the specific silence of things that do not breathe. Sienna called again. She asked what was happening. She used their names. She asked them to confirm they were well, to say anything, to transmit even briefly so she knew there was a connection. The answer came in pieces. First the quality of breathing changed, shallower, faster, a sound that Connor recognized with the cold certainty of instinct as someone who was frightened. Then a voice, barely audible, barely recognizable, because the voice they knew had been easy and loose and slightly sarcastic, and this voice was none of those things. Coming down. Stay there. Keep quiet. And then the sound of someone moving very fast through undergrowth. And then nothing. Finn had been standing at the edge of the trees this entire time. Connor realized, looking at him now, that Finn had not reacted to any of this. Had not turned. Had not tensed. Was watching the slope above with an expression that was not calm, exactly, but was something worse than calm. Something like recognition. Sienna said everyone should stay together. Everyone agreed. No one moved their chairs. Connor looked into the darkness beyond the fire's reach and noticed, in the way you notice something you have been not noticing for several minutes already, that there was a shape at the edge of the light. He did not say anything. He looked at Amelia. She was already looking at the same place. The shape was seated. In a camp chair they had placed there earlier and then moved and then apparently placed there again, though Connor could not account for the movement. Seated in the way a person sits when they have been sitting for a long time. Comfortably. Without urgency. It did not move. Declan picked up the torch and aimed it. The chair was empty, It had been empty the entire time. But the shape was still there. You are sitting near a fire that no longer warms you. You understand this now, the point at which fire stops being comfort and becomes only evidence that you are visible. That whatever is in the dark can see you perfectly. That the light you thought was protecting you is the very thing making you a target. The brothers came out of the trees at speed. They looked changed. Clothes muddy, breathing ragged, eyes moving constantly. Not with fear exactly, with something more specific. With the look of people who have seen something they cannot yet speak about because the words for it do not yet exist. They sat. Someone gave them water. The fire cracked. One of them, the elder, said they had been followed on the slope. Not by an animal. He was very specific about this. He had heard too many animals, had walked too many places, to mistake the particular deliberate quality of what had come after them. It had matched their pace precisely. It had stopped when they stopped. It had been not behind them but beside them, somewhere just past a range where trees made sight impossible. And then, at a certain point on the descent, he had seen it. Not clearly. The edge of something. Seated on the ground, against a birch trunk, in the posture of someone who had been waiting for a very long time. Perfectly still. Watching them with an attention so complete it had a physical quality, like pressure. When they had turned their headlamps toward it, there was nothing there. Just bark. Just dark. But the footsteps had continued behind them all the way down. Sienna looked at Connor. Connor's hand, without him choosing to move it, had found the pocket of his blue fleece. The folding knife. The small familiar weight of it. He thought about the evening he had received it. Christmas. His mum's kitchen. The particular quality of light through the window over the sink, winter light at 4 in the afternoon, gray and slanted and full of warmth regardless. The smell of that kitchen. Pine from the tree. Something baking. The complete safety of a place where nothing could reach you. The knife had been a practical gift. A going-away gift. A you'll be careful gift. He held it now and understood that it was not going to help him with whatever was in the trees. Then a car alarm triggered below. Not their car. Not an alarm going off. The specific sound of a sensor activating, the single sharp chirp that a vehicle produces when something touches it. Then silence. Then a second chirp. Different vehicle. As if something had moved deliberately from one to the next. No one had gone near the vehicles. Everyone's keys were in the camp. The chair scraped. That subtle, undeniable drag. Weight lifting. Someone standing. Then nothing. The chair settled. Still. Finn was gone. Connor looked at the edge of the trees and Finn was simply no longer there, and no one could say with certainty when he had left, and no one was willing to go looking. They went into the tents. No sleep came. Sounds arrived at irregular intervals through the night, footsteps that circled the camp at a distance that stayed just out of certain identification, sounds from the trees that were almost voices and were more frightening for not quite resolving into words. When dawn came gray and cold through the nylon, Connor lay still for a long moment and looked at the ceiling of the tent. He was intact. He was breathing. He was present. He reached into his pocket. The knife was gone. Air is what I keep returning to, sitting with this story in the quiet after the last telling. There is a specific kind of fear that belongs to places where we are not the most present thing. Not the most aware. Not the one watching most carefully. We build fires because they push the dark back. We travel in groups because numbers imply safety. We carry small tools and tell ourselves they are enough. But the dark already knows we're there. It was watching before we arrived. It will be watching after we leave. That is not meant to comfort you. The detail that stays with me longest is the empty chair. The shape that was there and then was not. Because the most frightening thing was never what was seen. It was the gap between what was noticed and what was real. The moment you understand that your own perception of safety was itself the thing you should have been afraid of. The fire you built to see by is the reason you could not. Sleep well. The house is very quiet right now. Listen to it.